pornography is a serious issue. There's a lot of young guys in particular approach me because they're, based on the questions I'm getting, they're watching a lot of really intense pornography. It should become obvious why things like pornography, not just the accessibility of pornography, but the intensity of pornography can negatively shape real-world romantic and sexual interactions. This is a serious concern. The discussion is happening now. You know, I'll just be direct about it. They were asking whether or not masturbation was bad. They were asking whether or not masturbation with ejaculation was particularly bad. And here's my stance on this. I'm a biologist and a neuroscientist, not a psychologist. But what we know for sure is that if an individual repeatedly engages in this circuitry, let's say masturbation and pornography with increasingly potent forms of stimulation that are on a screen, a couple of things happen. First of all, what's being reinforced? What's being reinforced is a high dopaminergic response to watching other people engage in sexual behavior, which is very different than being in a first-person sexual experience, okay? So right there, you know that what's being reinforced is not actually any kind of improvement in communication skills.
Voyeurism.
It's voyeurism. And as these questions started to come in more and more, I started to realize there was a lot of kind of undertones of people talking about fear of or experience with sexual dysfunction that clearly pornography can lead to. And here I'm specifically talking about males. I actually don't know the literature on females. So here I'm talking about...
Females don't use visual pornography to the same degree.
I see.
They use literary pornography.
I see. So... So, and then you start to think about, okay, what happens in the cascade or the arc of sexual arousal and orgasm? What happens is that initially there's it's parasympathetically dominant, meaning if somebody is too stressed, they actually can't engage in sexual behavior. The arousal response doesn't occur. Erection is blunted, but the actual orgasm response and ejaculation is strongly associated with the so-called sympathetic nervous system, which has nothing to do with sympathy. It has everything to do with, it's a kind of a stress response. And then it reverses to a parasympathetic response. And a hormone called prolactin increases dramatically after ejaculation in males. What does that do? That blunts dopamine release and testosterone for a very long period of time, which makes sense if pair bonding and sort of, you know, in our species anywhere, there's this idea that then other molecules would be exchanged with partners, pair bonding, potential for raising mates, etc. Without getting into a huge discussion about that, the point is this. Masturbation and pornography are potently tapping into the dopamine system and can undermine the very processes of which I consider healthy processes of finding a mate, you know, dating, communication, eventually, if it's appropriate, sexual interaction, etc.
Like it's undermining pair bonding.
And pair bonding.
So here's a question: if you're seeking sexual release through pornography and you go through the whole cycle and you get a prolactin release, do you bond with yourself?
So this is very interesting. The biology explains it as what's left there is a kind of an open loop, a kind of an emptiness, right? Because bonding with the self is a complicated notion. I mean, there's a healthy version of that, of course, loving oneself and self-referencing. And again, this is more far more your domain than mine in terms of what a healthy self-relation is. But in the absence of a real partner there, of an absence of real sexual partner, there's an open loop of neurochemicals, including oxytocin and prolactin. The dopamine, remember, dopamine goes up during pursuit, anticipation, then peaks and then crashes below baseline after orgasm and ejaculation. So this kind of low that people fear is putting them into an amotivated state. You ever notice that when you get on a phone and you're scrolling Instagram, it's like a lot of fun. Like, this stuff is cool. You're seeing people. And then sometimes you're on there and like, this doesn't feel good, but I'm doing it anyway.
Yeah.
I'm just doing it. That's exactly how people talk about their drug use. That's exactly how people talk about alcohol use. That's exactly how people talk about gambling. You imagine this high, but the high doesn't show up. And that's, you're dopamine depleted. You need to take some time away from it and then come back and then you can enjoy it again. Now, with pornography, it's a slippery slope, right? There's also a whole aspect of pornography, which is that if people are pursuing pornography and they're not pursuing relationships, there is the potential that they reach their 20s and 30s and they are truly dysfunctional in terms of, look, every species has two major goals: protect the young and make more of itself. Mm-hmm. You know, whether or not you decide to have children or not is a personal issue. I personally don't have children. I may someday, but every species protects its young. The Maternal aggression is amazing, right? A mother protecting its young, there's nothing like it in the animal kingdom. Actually, that's not triggered by testosterone, that's triggered by estrogen, which is interesting. But the parents of every species try and protect the young, and they try and make more young. This is every species is driven to do that. And you think about what porn and masturbation, these things really are. I'm not calling them sinful. What I'm saying is they are potentially addictive, especially with the availability of pornography. So, beware, just everyone's different, and people have to be careful about these circuitries. You really need to protect them.